One gentleman with a long-standing career in broadcasting is Ed Borne. And as you will soon hear, his professionalism and influence on others made him a perfect fit for KTIB. Ed Borne, how you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. Thank you for calling me.
Oh, no problem. It's always good to talk to a quality professional like yourself.
I appreciate the kind words.
Well, thank you. Are you from our area originally?
My family's from Raceland. We moved to New Orleans, and my young growing up years were in New Orleans. We moved there, and I attended elementary school, and then went to high school in New Jersey.
Beautiful New Jersey.
Yes, went to a town called Patterson, New Jersey, and Newton, New Jersey, and I attended high school there.
Mm-hmm.
And then went to school at Don Bosco College, and then after that, I taught school for a couple of years, and then I returned to Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me, growing up, was broadcasting always an interest of yours?
Well, I tell you, in a way it was. When I was a young, I guess 10 or 11 years old, radio, of course, was the only entertainment medium besides movies. And they had a radio show for young people on WNOE radio. And it was in the old St. Charles Hotel, a glorious, lovely hotel. And every Saturday, they had a program with one of the most delightful ladies you'll ever want to meet. And it was a program on literature and education, the finer things in school, trying to encourage young people. And the lady was Frances Parkinson Kyes. And for those who don't know her, she wrote many books about Louisiana, Plantation Parade, and many romantic novels about Louisiana. And she was elderly by this time. And we would sit around the table, and she had a pince-nez, the type of glasses that you just sit on your nose,
mm-hmm.
so ear holding.
Mm-hmm.
And she would take that pince-nez, and the children would sit around, and she would say, before each show, she would say, "And now remember my children, my name is Kyes. It rhymes with your eyes." And then we would talk, and she would introduce us to the wonderful world of literature and the wonderful world of English.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yes, very, very interesting in those days. That's when I had my first, and I would see these people. And I had the opportunity to. My next door neighbor was a family called Vidakovich.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, he worked at WWL Radio. His name was Pinky Vidakovich. And he did all of the Dr. Tishner's commercials, and he was the mayor of Bayou Pompon on the Dawn Busters program,
mm-hmm.
with Margie Alhurt, and those wonderful early morning people in the morning called Dawn Busters, and they were our next door neighbors on Frenchman Street.
Mm-hmm.
And it was intriguing to meet these people. Henry Dupre, who was a young man at the time. And I was very young, so you get pop-eyed when you knew you were meeting somebody from radio in those days.
Right, and of course, I'll also tell all our younger listeners that Dawn Busters, late 40s through the 50s, a tremendous radio program at WWL full of music and variety, and sounds like a lot of colorful memories.
And they were incredible people. I mean, you would get up and listen to the Dawn Busters, and such a good program, to wake up early in the morning, and that was nationwide. I mean, that didn't only happen in New Orleans. It went all over the country, and it was really one of the most popular shows in New Orleans, too.
Wow.
But it was having those people live next door and seeing all of these people come in and out, you know.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
But anyway, that's how I got it peaked. And then as I say, when I came back, would you believe, I went into and I worked at the Marsden Airport and reading VIPs as they changed planes, stuff like that, you know, famous movie stars and big name politicians and so forth. We did that, and then I went to work at LSU,
Mm-hmm.
journalism department, and I stayed there for about 5 years, and then I went to New Orleans and I started a little business, an advertising business, and it was a big enterprise, let me tell you.
Mm.
I would go to the different Catholic churches, and I would offer to print their weekly bulletin for them free. In exchange for that, I could advertise on the back page of the bulletin at $10 or $20 a spot, you know, from the parishioners, business people, and I did that. And I bumped into a professor from Loyola. I was at WWL Radio in the old Roosevelt Hotel, and I was talking with one of the great newsmen of our time, who worked, Fred Hammond, and we were talking, and I came in and they told me that I was trying to get information about advertising on radio for some of the customers, and then they told them what I did, and Dr. Bonomo, who was kind of handicapped, he was kind of crippled, and he taught journalism at Loyola. And Dr. Bonomo kind of laughed, and from then on he would call me his mendicant advertiser. He always got pleasure out of calling me his mendicant advertiser.
Wow.
And then eventually I went to the Columbia School of Journalism, and that's where I met Ken. And we became fast friends, Ken Berthelot and I, and we brought, I was practicing news. I wanted news and writing. And Ken wanted sports. He loved it. And he lived in sports. And we would go, I had a tape recorder, reel-to-reel, the old style.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this real impressive-looking hand microphone. And this tape recorder was able to put on huge reel-to-reel tapes. And we would go together, and we would sit in the audience. We got permission to sit in the audience of these high school games together. And Ken would do the play-by-play into this reel-to-reel, so that later on he could hear what he sounded like broadcasting a live sports event.
Mm-hmm.
I was practicing the color and then doing the little commercials and whatnot in there. That's how we got started. And then he went to Ken got a job working at KTIB, and I would come with Ken all the time to Houma. At that time, I was a night manager of a hotel in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and I would come with Ken 2 nights a week on my days off, and we would work together. And then eventually, he was brought like a DJ.
Mm-hmm.
And one night with KTIB, they had started the FM. Now, the FM was brand new in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And so at sunset, KTIB would shut down, would stop broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would go to transfer the programming to the FM. and that went on till midnight. See? And one night we were in there, and Ken had a whole bunch of albums to give away. And so he said, well, on the FM, he said, well, the third caller will get this free album, and they were good albums. We're talking quality CBS type albums, you know. They're really good. And he said the third caller will get this album if you can guess the name of this tune. And he put it on. And, of course, probably at that time, FM had just started. And maybe they had, between Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche and St. Mary Parish, and St. Charles Parish, probably all of them combined maybe had 25 or 50 FM radios, you know. And nobody called. And Ken said, oh my God, what am I going to do? So nobody called. So after a while, we were talking together, and we decided that the best thing to do was to encourage somebody to call. So we said that, look, if you're having trouble calling in and the phones are busy, continue to call in. We'll be glad to I'll never forget that night. That was a long and 3 minutes. And, but eventually nobody called. So he said that we have a winner, and that was it, you know. He left it at that. But that was an interesting evening that we enjoyed.
Well, I think another story you need to tell the listeners about one night when y'all left the station. I believe you were going towards the Copper Kettle restaurant.
Yeah, we went to, there was a restaurant in Thibodeau, a nice restaurant. I think it was a Copper Kettle or something like that. And when they closed the station at midnight, we went there and had a hamburger and early morning breakfast type of thing, if you want to call it that. And afterwards, we left there and we drove down Highway 1 to Raceland, and then took the old Highway 1, which went by the Gotcha Sugar Refinery, by Robbie's Motel back in there, where it used to be, you know. And we were driving, we crossed the bridge, went over 308, and then went back on this highway past the refinery, and a state police car got behind us, and then another car got behind us, and there were two of them following us, you know. And Ken was worried. He said, my goodness, he said, I've been obeying the speed limit. I've been very careful. And we were in his doodle bug. And it was raining, drizzly rain, and kind of cold. And we continued on, and we got to where they were building the present-day 4-lane, where that highway joins the 4-lane. When we got to there, all kind of spotlights and headlights came on. Police turned on their red lights, warning lights, and there was a loudspeaker, and it said, please get out of the car. So we got out of the car. Ken got out of the car. I stayed inside. And he said, I don't know what they want. He said, I haven't done a thing. I've been very careful. I'm a good driver. And he walked over, and there were guns everywhere pointing at us. And the state trooper asked to see his driver's license and asked him his story, and he was telling that we just closed off the air, KTIB, and after that we went to the car. We had this hamburgers and whatnot, early morning breakfast, and then we got in the car and come in. And then the next thing I hear is, will the passenger get out of the car? And I got out. And I looked up, and there was the shotgun pointing right at me with a state trooper holding a flashlight, and the shotgun pointed right at me. And he said, where's your ID? I took out, I was shaking so much and so unnerved, I took my wallet. I had a bunch of people that went to a hotel, you know. There was these calling cards with you, and I had a big stack of them. And I opened my wallet, my hand was shaking so much. Calling cards and ID, everything went all over the, down on the ground where it was all wet. And finally I got my driver's license out, and I showed it to him. And he says, this is expired. And the other state trooper said, "That's all right, he wasn't driving." And what turns out of this thing, and we gathered our stuff, and they confirmed that we worked for the station. I think they must have called you, Smith, and they called you. And we got in our car. They confirmed that, and we continued on our way to New Orleans. But what had happened was that earlier in the evening, someone in a blue Volkswagen had robbed the pharmacy in Raceland. And here we come, putt-putting in Kent's blue Volkswagen at midnight, and we were prime suspects. So it was very unnerving, and we laughed all the way home, although we didn't enjoy it at the time.
Understandably. And also you had mentioned to me that I believe you and Ken also worked together up in Alexandria, right?
Yeah, we both worked there. I went up to Alexandria at KTIB Radio and then at KTIB TV. Our sportsman in the TV station quit, and my boss says, "Look," she said, "do you know anybody that you think would make a terrific sports person?" I said, "I sure do." So I called Ken, who at that time I believe was working at KTIB-AM, and called Ken, and he came up for the interview, and I recommended Ken, and Ken got the job.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a good job on his own of impressing the boss, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked up there. We worked there. I anchored the news, and he anchored the sports. And we did that for 5 or 6 years together.
Mm-hmm.
And then he eventually would come down and cover the Saints games. And he began to work closely with Buddy Diliberto. And then he went to do the weekend sports at Channel 8 with Buddy Diliberto.
Mm-hmm.
And I remained in Alexandria. And then Channel 2 in Baton Rouge called and asked me to come to work at Channel 2 in Baton Rouge, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there as the assignments editor. And Ken stayed a number of years at Channel 8. And he got a plum of a job. Mac Brown, who is now the coach of Texas, was the coach at Tulane. And Tulane Ken would do the Tulane show, weekly show after the game, and they would look at the film. And he caught Mac Brown's eye, and Mac Brown hired him as an assistant athletic director of television and radio at Tulane. And he was there for, 14 years, 13 years, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
At Tulane as the play-by-play caller. And, of course, I left Channel 2, and I came down home, and my wife at that time was becoming quite ill. And, again, I worked at KTIB selling.
Mm-hmm.
I worked there for about a year, I guess, selling. But the best time that I had there at KTIB and selling was when Nichols went to the playoffs.
Right.
And that was an exciting time. And I can tell you, it was nice to sell advertising at that time because everybody wanted to support Nichols State Athletics. And it was nice to have so many people willing to buy the sports package that KTIB was offering at that time.
That's right. Of course, Nichols State, 1996, a great run under Coach Barbier, and got into the playoffs. Like you said, a lot of people just was tremendously behind Nichols.
Tremendous. And I remember, can I mention an advertisement?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. You remember the people with Bubba's 2 restaurant?
Right.
I mean, they were so enthusiastic and gung-ho, and they went with the team. They flew with the team to the different places, and like I say, they bought the advertising for these playoffs. It was quite an exciting time for advertising at that time.
Wow, yeah, it definitely was. And like I said, Nichols State sports still a huge part of our community today.
Yeah.
Let me go on. I want to ask you about some other people you knew, both at KTIB and at KHOM, who I know you got real fond memories of. So first of all, let's talk about the longtime owner of KTIB, who you worked with, Raymond Sadie.
Well, Ray, I tell you what, at one time, I was elected president of the Louisiana State Associated Press of Louisiana. All of the television and radio stations, they elected me president. And we would have our annual meetings in different cities, and Ray would always come. Ray Sadie would always come there. And he would attend all of these functions, but he was an observer. He wasn't a participating person, you know. He would sit there and he would visit and whatnot with people, but he was always an observer. And he always attended faithfully all of these different functions that we had, the annual convention, where people submitted the best product and of their broadcast year, and then they would be judged by an Associated Press organization from another state, and then they would select the winners of the best one. And Ray would always attend very faithfully all of these functions. And later on, he and I talked, and that's how I got to work at KTIB in sales. I went to work for Ray, and I went to talk to Ray, and then he had me doing the sales at KTIB, and then on a couple of occasions, he asked me, the news director at the station had to be off or was not available on certain nights, and I would cover the parish council meetings and whatnot during those times and prepare all of the news cuts and whatnot for the next morning, for broadcast morning. But I can tell you this about Ray Sadie. If anybody has worked for a boss that is a good boss, I would say on the top 10 you would find Ray Sadie. And not only that, with Ray Sadie, when he told you something that was his bond, you know, it would get some people that you wouldn't trust. They might be shyster. Mm-hmm. But with Ray Sadie was one of the few people that you'll meet in broadcasting, I'm telling you, who will tell you it's black, and 10 weeks later it's still black. His word was his bond. He was an excellent man to have as a boss. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about another person who I know you real knew well, who's also been in broadcasting for decades, Marie Bergeron.
Oh, my. Look, Marie was, I tell you what, she was short of stature, but she was tall in knowledge. I haven't heard that name in a good while. She was the station manager when I was selling. And she did in the morning, she did a very interesting interview program, like around between 7 and 8 or at that time. And she always had some very interesting guests and whatnot. And she looked like somebody that would be like your grandmother, but you wouldn't believe her to be an executive, and she was. I'm telling you, it's amazing that of course, you're working at the station, and I believe she lives just a few blocks from the station.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, she was a very, very pleasant person that you could go in and talk to.
Mm-hmm. By the way, did you also happen to know another gentleman who's in radio for a long time down here, Roy Vicknair?
Oh, my. Roy, now that's a gentleman. Now that's a gentleman's gentleman. That man, I think, if the atomic bomb dropped next to Roy, I don't think Roy would be unnerved on the air. He was so calm and serene and very meticulous. He broadcast his show, and he was very, very meticulous. when he did things, and sometimes I would ask him about a piece of equipment, that when I was doing the news. And Roy had the patience to show you how to do something,
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very, very radio personality, and for years. And then when he retired, he went into the making of wedding videos. You could hire his company, and they would come and shoot your wedding video. And they could make a video album, taking old pictures, family pictures of both families, and putting them together, taking pictures of them, and making a kind of video album in memory of your wedding. And of course, I was working as a volunteer for the Southdown Plantation, and we were making a video of the tour that would take place, so that you could train your docents by taking this video tour. And I shot the video, and I wanted to, if all of this raw footage I wanted to edit, I took it to Roy, and Roy edited it into about a 1-hour package for me. And we still use that at Southdown Plantation for handicapped people, for instance, that can't get up to the second floor. We show the tour from the second floor part of it,
Mm-hmm.
But Roy is a very talented person.
Let's talk about another gentleman I know you have real pleasant memories of, Leroy Martin.
Leroy, now that was a man, he had the Weekend Cajun show. And I'm telling you, that was a good show. That was a popular show. And where he got he had these Cajun records, Cajun music, and he was knowledgeable. And not only that, he was a recording artist of renown in his own, He, back in the 50s, he was very popular among the Louisiana, not only Cajun people, but also with the rock and roll group. He produced quite a few songs in that arena. It was very, very popular. And I know our family would always listen to him, especially my grandfather loved to listen to him, because my grandfather could hardly speak English, but he would like the tunes. He didn't understand much that was said, but he loved the tunes. Now, I did not know Leroy as, personally as a lot of other people did, but I did have the opportunity to meet him. I had an opportunity to meet him. He was very prominent in a recent thing here in Louisiana, the Congrès Mondial,
Mm-hmm.
the International Congress of Cajuns that met here. He was one of the MCs of one of the programs, and he also did some entertaining there. But he was I'm telling you, it was some very, very, KTIB has brought out some very, very prominent people.
Well, let's talk about another gentleman that worked at KTIB and also worked that you liked a whole lot, Les Domingue.
Les Domingue, that was a real friendly fellow. He was colorful, and he loved his Cajun music. And he used to have programs that he really enjoyed doing. He had a swap shop. He ran that, and he had his own Cajun band. And my favorite memory is walking in the studio, and Les would be at the microphone there, and he would have this sandwich meal spread out, on the board, control board, eating his sandwiches or eating his meal. And but he loved to entertain, and he entertained at 10 or 11 in Houma. When he passed away, I don't know if many people know, he passed away while at work.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had the funeral, I have never in my life seen a traffic jam down in La Rose area down there on Highway 1 as they had that night for Les's Week. That was an incredible turnout of affection from the many people who had listened to him on radio, because most of the conversation with people, we're going to miss him on radio. And Les will be sorely missed.
Very much so. Let's also talk about another gentleman who I believe is your cousin, Danny Borne.
Danny Borne. He is Danny Borne.
Mm-hmm.
Dan worked there. And when I would listen to him, mostly was on Sunday morning, on the weekend. And he eventually went to Baton Rouge. And he worked at Channel 9. And he was one of their anchors at Channel 9. And then later he left there, and he went to work at for the office of Senator Allen Ellender. And then when the senator passed away, he went to work for Russell Long, Senator Russell Long. And then when Senator Long retired, then he went into private business, and he became one of the lobbyists for the chemical industry. He worked as the executive vice president or the vice president for the Louisiana Chemical Association, and he handles all of their publicity. And he's been there for years.
Mm-hmm. Now tell all the listeners why he changed the pronunciation of his last name.
Well, and it's common for our name. Everybody calls us Barnes, B-A-R-N-E-S.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, my name is Ed Borne, they say, oh, Barnes. Are you related to this Walter Barnes or that Barnes? And just put a little hyphen behind his E. and call it Borne.
Mm-hmm.
And but he is, that way you end up the Barnes aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from his one of his uncles in Thibodeau told me that.
Okay. Let's talk about some other people that you were close to in radio, including a couple good folks at KTIB-AM. One gentleman in particular, Dave Burris.
Dave Burris was like a splinter. He was tall. He was a tall drink of water. Now, that was a nice fella. And he was always willing to help you when I would... he's always willing to help me do things. And, several times I had to do some news stories, and Dave came to my aid. He was working the board, and he was always... and he was a listener, too. He liked to listen to you and see if he could help you. He was a very, very helpful person. That was a tall, tall fella.
Now, let's. You had a great story I want you to tell the listeners about another big name at KTIB-AM, Rick Fauché.
Now, Rick worked at KTIB, and we, in Alexandria, we had a program that was on before the Today Show called Jambalaya. And it ran from 6 in the morning to 7. And Rick was working at KTIB-AM. When this host for this show quit, we were having a staff meeting, and they said that we had any ideas of where we might find a replacement for this girl who was leaving. And Ken and I looked at each other, and we thought right away, Rick Fauché, because he was good radio personality type, and he was young and he was energetic. And so we went to the boss, and when I told the boss that we got to have this fellow, he would be an asset, you know. And Ken said the same thing, you know, let's get him here. You'll find that he'll be an asset. So he came up, and then the boss was wishy-washy, you know, so we finally got him to accept Rick. And Rick worked for a year, and then he ended up going on to larger stations. And he ended up one night, 3-something in the morning, I get a phone call, and it was Rick. He was so excited. He had just signed a contract to do 3 or 4 shows with Dick Clark. He was so excited, I'm telling you. And he told me what time the first show was going to be on and so forth. It was going to come, I think, out of Phoenix, Arizona. And then he eventually moved to West Virginia. And that's where Rick met his wife. And she lived and worked in TV in one city. He worked in TV in another city. And they got a house in between. And they would commute to different ways. And then Rick, she eventually went to work for National Geographic magazine. And his wife is the one who chooses when they doing a documentary about a country. She goes there and makes the site selection and does all the preparatory work to doing that 1-hour documentary, a 2-hour documentary that they're doing for National Geographic. And Rick went on into acting in little theater and so forth up there. And now Rick, this last year or so, I think the last 2 years, he won the prestigious Helen Hayes Award for drama on stage in the Northeast. And Rick is doing very, very well. He lives in Maryland with his wife and children. And I talked to his father here in town. His father is O.J. Fauché, the barber on Main Street. And I talk with him a lot. But Rick is doing very, very well, and he's very, very successful. And he's raised some children. I think one of the daughters is graduating or just graduated from the university in Miami, Ohio. And and then they got the other little girl coming along. So they are. Rick has made quite a name for himself in drama, and he made about 5 or 6 movies. One night I saw most of them science fiction, would you believe?
Oh, very good. Well, it sounds like all the years that you've followed broadcasting, got to know a lot of people, it sounds like you have a whole lot of pleasant memories.
Beautiful memories. It's the greatest, news is the greatest thing in the world. And for anybody that wants to go to school and study it, they can get that communications degree. It's so important. And then work hard. Be a perfectionist. Work hard on your stories and on your writing skills.
Very much so. Well, listen, before we go, is there anything you'd like to say to all our listeners?
I'll tell you what. In 1953, 2003, that's 50 years of pretty good broadcasting, and from a totally dedicated community radio station. Many radio stations are bought by huge networks and so forth, and they lose that local flavor because every station is handled by the same corporation. But KTIB has remained faithful.
Ed Borne, a model of perseverance.